Good morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition here to give you a quick recap on last night's Committee of the Whole meeting. Heather, how are you doing today?
Pretty good today.
Good to see you. So last night, after a couple of weeks, we got a little break for a week because of the snowstorm and an encryption event. We had a school board meeting. So Heather, do you want to let us know what we went over last night during the school board meeting?
Yeah, so the first thing that I think is really important is that both the chair and Superintendent Cox took the time to acknowledge that the last few days were frustrating. We had snow days and e-learning days while we were going through massive IT issues of a proportion that our district has never seen before. Both of them took the time to acknowledge and apologize to parents and to caregivers for how frustrating that must have been, and to thank our IT department for the heavy lift that they have been doing in getting our systems up and running. And we know that they still have work to do on that. Once that was done, we really sort of learned last night there's a new format to the Committee of the Whole meetings. And really, the board doesn't want to see quite such long presentations. They want to get their information, submit questions, and then they want to have just more of a dialogue. And so we got to experience that last night, maybe a little more off the cuff than usual, because it sounds like the board members were delayed in getting their packages and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, and then we learned a little bit about where we are in the budget process. So one thing that's interesting to note is this is a very different budget process than MPS has ever done before. They're calling it a values-based budget process. And so we learned a little bit about that. We know that principals currently have their budgets and are taking those to site councils. We talked a little bit about how we're going to be spending some of the money this year, and some of the highlights will be in our slide of the night. And then we talked a lot about, then we took a break. And then we had like a second meeting, which was about the superintendent search. And that was the one that happened the last time. Really, in that one, BWP sort of presented like an idea, some ideas, some things that they.
Just really quick, BWP is the executive search firm that we
Yes, they're
hired.
gonna they're gonna help us find a superintendent and help us facilitate the process. And so they kind of had given some ideas or some possible timelines, and then the board had a really good chance to react to those and give input. And it sounds like BWP had a person in the room taking notes, and the chair had someone taking notes. And so it looks like they'll be coming back with some ideas around all of that. And then after like 2 meetings in a night, we were out of there.
Yeah. So I mean, it was like Heather mentioned, it's a little bit different of a committee of the whole night than we've had over the last few months. Remember, committee of the whole for the last few months have been a set of schools and principals coming to present about a specific topic. I think the board has said, like, while that's been really helpful, they've also needed a little bit more space to have dialogue and do more collaborative work together. So last night, as Heather mentioned, we got a little bit of a preview of some of the key investments that the district wants to make in this upcoming budget. And so, as Heather mentioned, my slide of the night is a highlight of those investments. And so it looks like the district will be sharing about or using about $30 million to go towards learning loss and really target that to trying to figure out how we create intervention teams. So the way that like our instruction works is we have what they refer to as MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support. And so core instruction is tier one. So core instruction is just like the instruction, the like base level instruction that everybody receives. Then tier two is like, okay, we notice that there's a group of students that are behind or not getting the material. And so we are going to have another level of intervention to support those students. These intervention teams are supposed to help with that with those tier two learners to help get them caught up. And so it looks like the district is going to allocate 2 ESPs, or educational assistants, and then 1 teacher to every school for every 75 students in elementary school that are behind, and then every 100 students in I think middle school through and high school that are behind. And so that after doing the math and figuring it out, that's going to be about a $30 million investment. Another exciting investment is it looks like the district wants to invest at least a half or a 0.5 FTE or full-time position. So a part-time position half the week at every school, a librarian or a library media specialist. So every school will have access to a library and somebody who's helping take care of books and helping them connect them with reading and literacy and all the fun stuff that comes with that. And so these are two big investments that they're going to be making, and they're going to be using a majority of this money is going to come from the ESSER $3 or federal aid money that came from COVID that we have to use by next year. And so, yeah, there's a lot happening, and it's a lot of exciting things to really address learning loss. So that is the slide of the night. So with that, Heather, do you want to slide into, see what I did there? Slide into our most valuable moment and our do better moments?
Yeah. Okay. So I would give my most valuable moment to this new budgeting process. I think that some of the things that I heard about the folks who were in the room, Senior Officer of Finance GOP, right? Some of the folks who were on the panel, Superintendent Cox, the things that I heard that they learned about their colleagues, about the work, about in some cases, like this department over here is doing something and this department over here is doing something, and they may never talk to each other, but it turns out like two parts of their work overlap. And this process of listening to 50 plus departments, I mean, we are such a big organization, over the space of this time, really created both a human level in our district that I think we've really needed for a long time, an understanding and a real sense of listening. And I think my favorite moment was when Superintendent Cox said, this is the first time, she said, someone who was presenting said, this is the first time in my career in Minneapolis Public Schools where someone has asked me what I actually think I would need to do my job well. And to me, that there are these moments in this work that are transformational. And so I really think this budgeting process felt, at least when I listened to the growth and from the folks who were doing it, transformational.
Yeah, that's excellent. My most valuable moment was hearing about the opportunity to actually invest in learning loss, right? And doing something innovative. I know the district has been using, because they were mandated to use 20% of their funds towards learning loss. And there wasn't super clear what the plan was in the past, but this is a really exciting development. I think after a few years and a level of advocacy around like we needing tutoring, all these things, finally they've been able to come up with a longer term solution for, just how are we going to provide that additional layer of support. And so the investments that we heard about yesterday, especially around the intervention teams, and then also around the librarian specialists or media specialists, library media specialists. I think that was really exciting. I love to see that type of investment made into, core instruction. Love to see that made into academics and, things that we really feel like will move the needle. And the way that Interim Superintendent Cox was talking about it, the way that the cabinet was talking about it, the way that even some of the board members were responding to it, it really felt like there's a high level of confidence that this will help move the needle for our students. So I'm happy to hear that. We don't hear that very often. So that was my most valuable moment. And my most valuable moment actually kind of connects with my do better moment. Let me just transition to that. So as a part of that whole conversation, one thing that was asked was, we've lost a lot of families. We've lost, especially families of color. What are we do? How are we listening to our families of color? It was also asked, how are we going to ensure that these intervention teams have like the cultural competency to support student learning? And so the response was then went to a bunch of people, but it landed with Executive Director Francis, Executive Director of Climate and Culture. And there were just a few times in that conversation where Executive Director Francis referred to what I consider the police lynching of George Floyd as either post-George Floyd, like we're in a post-George Floyd era, or the George Floyd event. And I think that's really, really minimizing, obviously, of what happened to George Floyd, to George Floyd's family, what happened in our city and the racial uprising that took place in our city. And I think especially as the leader of the climate and culture of our district, I think you just need to be a little bit more prepared to talk about these issues. And I just didn't feel like, I understand it's been a long few days. It's been, you're answering questions off the cuff, right? Whatever. And I'm probably guilty of not saying the best things or framing things in the best way too, when I'm put on the spot. But I just felt like that. I think we've talked about, and we need to talk about, the murder of George Floyd enough, where you're not referring to the murder of George Floyd in that way, and especially in traditionally white institutions and in those spaces when you're trying to deconstruct the racism in the system and you're the person in charge of that. And that's a lot to put on one person, right? That shouldn't be just on Executive Director Francis's shoulders. At the same time, he is the one leading that charge, and he needs to lead by example. And I just did not feel like, some of the ways that he was talking about this and talking about racism, like, it just didn't meet the need in the moment that we are currently in, and where I think MPS says they want to be. So that was my do better moment. It's just a little bit more attention there, a little bit more care and caution as you're talking about these things, and how the lynching and the police murder of George Floyd really did impact the city. So that is my do better moment.
Yep. Okay, so mine kind of spins back to yours. So it's a good thing we're just on this loop.
Okay.
So it was really exciting last night to learn about the intervention teams and the strategy, and the fact that we're not dispensing them equally, we're dispensing teams equitably, right? I love that. And I'm really frustrated that we waited until the final year of our ESSER money to do anything different other than just like sustain what we had. You and I, we were in those conversations when that second group of big chunk of money came in, and we were like, let's do something. Like, we have been underfunded for so long. Let's do something transformational with this money. And I'm really excited about this. I really appreciated Superintendent Cox saying, I was brave to do this, and I need my principals and my teachers to be brave as well. I loved that. I think it's great that we're doing it. It just, to me, if you think about childhood being short and what we know is happening in the reality for our children in the city, and how they are not leaving elementary, middle, and high school with the skills they need to live the life they love, this is a lot late for me. And so I will be following it. Now, we did hear that if this is successful, that we are going to try somehow to like create the way to keep it going. So I'm hoping that we can do that. I'm hoping that it's successful. And I'm hoping that that kiddos can get what they need in schools.
Yeah. It is frustrating that, we're this far away since we actually had gotten notice that we're going to receive this money, and it's taken us this long. And MPS again has gone through a lot over the last few years, but a lot of other districts have, and a lot of districts have also figured out what are they going to do with this money. And I guess late is better than never, but late is also not as good as right away. So.
Yeah, well, and you know what? I mean, on the upside, we've now watched other districts use this formula with great success. So we at least have a thing we can model after. But anyway, so, we'll see what happens with it. I'm excited for families and kiddos who've been concerned about this to get maybe some options and some support. So.
Right. Well, thank you so much for listening. Feel free to subscribe, follow, do whatever you do to find us. Comment. Tell us if you thought we messed up. So thank you for the time, and have a great rest of your day.